My name is Johnny Mae, and I'm here in the pink. Some photographs, they have this halo surrounding them, and he's like, oh, it's as if your heartbeat is in the frame. It's almost as if you're becoming invisible, in a sense, where you're giving room to something else to emerge. So you become the vessel that you're basically photographing, that you say you see in the work. Buildness started 3 years ago when I graduated. It was my graduation project, and the title is referring to a self-portrait, but mainly in painterly perspectives. And it started when I was divorcing, and I was in this kind of luminous space where I didn't really know who I was, yet I was excited, but also kind of melancholic. So I wanted to depict that without actually photographing myself. So I started to photograph my belongings and the things I had with me while I was doing an internship in London. And that's kind of how it started, as a way of, portraying the state that I was in, which was this kind of emotional state. And since that, it very much evolved into something much more abstract and philosophical. So back then the photographs were a bit more figurative than they are now, and they're kind of evolving. Also the colors, it's very intuitive, so sometimes they tend to be very dark and other times they're very light. But it's mainly the very bright works where I'm in a less happy state than the darker ones. I think in photography it's very typical to work in a series, but in other mediums you're not so bound to series, and I kind of wanted to break that up a bit. So sometimes in a show there's a work with a singular title that doesn't really fit into a series yet. Maybe it will come, but I also want to have these works that are like singular ones that stand for itself, where the title kind of steers it into a broader perspective, but they don't need a whole body of work or the research. It's just very time-bound, whereas with Buildness, it's much more a philosophical thing I'm interested in to research further within the project. And with Finsternis, it was much more, expressionistic in a way. I recently became a mother like a year ago, and I totally underestimated like the changes it had, and it very much came like a wave. Not only the labor, which people describe as a wave, but like the aftermath of it. And I kind of felt like I had to become this new person and leave the old one behind. And it was very brutal, yet also kind of warm. So I really wanted to depict this brutality versus kind of this very soft energy, because it had these both, the beautiful and the ugly. And I think that's why the works are very vibrant red, because it can be very lovable but also very aggressive. And I think it very much had these two things in it, and it still does. I'm a big fan of Cicely Brown's work, and I think with her the tension between abstraction and figuration is very interesting, and that's for me where the imagination kind of truly comes alive. Because when you have something that is so abstract, it's sometimes difficult to kind of find an entrance point, because it's like so open. But when it's too figurative, it's also too literal. So I find that the tension where I give like agency back to the viewer is in between those two stages. I find that kind of interesting to play with, and sometimes hit the right spot and sometimes completely miss it. Like one work here has it both for me, and that's where, you know, there's like development, and then you can go like, okay, what do I like about it? What do I dislike about it? Where's the growth? What works, what not? So I think I don't know, I just like to play with that. And the freedom there is in between the spaces, because either or for me feels kind of like imprisonment, but the in-between is very open and playful and I don't know, fun. I try to photograph black and white, but then it doesn't work because I tend to photograph the things that have color. So when you look at them, there's basically nothing in there because everything that made the photograph was the color. Color is very intuitive, and I think, blue can be melancholic, but it can also be very happy. And I think every color has, red's not only one thing, but it can have 7 different meanings, depending on the intensity or the shade or everything in the spectrum. So I find it very intriguing how color works and how many different things it can communicate. And when it kind of clicks with what I'm intuitively doing, there's a certain moment that I'm, okay, yeah, this is how everything is supposed to be in one work. And that's why I make a lot of tests color-wise, because there's only one that hits the right spot and the rest don't work with each other. But it just, and then in a way they do work because they have this conversation or something. I think once I've photographed, it's actually where the true work starts, because then you have to see what came out, which is always a surprise, because I don't have a strict working methodology. I just play like a kid on the floor in the middle of a room, and it's always a fucking mess, and there's always something that's been thrown over a roll. So there's a lot of accidents happening. And then in the end, when the photos are done and you start to print, that's when I become very kind of organized in a way. Because I think, to me, the photos have something very serious about the way, they kind of communicate the seriousness, but also very playful. And I think the seriousness comes from the printing part, where you have to make the right decisions, just like a curator, You have to make a good combination to have a good show. So you kind of become the curator of your own work, basically, in that printing process. And also for me, it's a medium. So it's like, just like having a brush in a way. And that's also why they're all unique works, because I also only shoot them once. So it's either right or wrong. There's nothing in between. But the work talks about the in between. But the process towards it's very black and white. I wish I was a painter. We had this wave of very good expressionistic painters, like action painters, and I think that would be like something I would kind of chase towards. But in a way, photography is such a good medium to be an expressionistic artist, because it's so violent in a way that it's so in the moment. So it's like a very good way to become a very good action painter, just with a different medium. I have like a lot of time that I'm basically just working in my head or philosophizing or reading, or I'm gardening the whole time. I'm like basically in my garden every day with my fingers in the dirt, because I need to clear my head in order to work. So when I work, there's nothing. So there's a lot of work before the actual work, but it takes a very long time to get into this stage of, especially when you're working on a big series, you don't want to, become repetitive. So it's like you kind of have to revisit, refeel, and I don't know. So I can't do it every day, because it really like also it makes me really tired, like 1 hour of shooting, because it has, I have to kind of lower myself down in my shoes instead of being up in my head where I'm basically normally at. So I think it kind of takes this shift, bodily, like metamorphosis in a way, to go into that state of where I'm actually able to make work instead of being this crazy, again, this duality. It has something, it gives, you know, it gives you something, but you also have to deliver something for it, basically.